This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
The America starts its literary tradition as linked to the broader tradition of the English literature. However, unique American characteristics and breadth of its production usually now cause it to be considered as separate path and tradition. There are American authors which popularized by their literary works. The Old Man in the Sea and The Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. Annabel Lee and the Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and the Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Young Goodman Brown and the Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The Great Gatsby, This Side of Paradise by Francis Scott Fitzgerald. Uncle Tom's Coven and The Minister's Wooing by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Little Men and Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Henry David Thoreau in Walden and Civil Disobedience. And lastly, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson was an American essayist, lecturer, and a poet who led the Transcendentalist movement in mid-19th century. He is the author of Self-Reliance, Nature, and The Representative Men. How many students know about Ralph Waldo Emerson? Let's see.
Kilala ko siyang author, pero hindi ako familiar sa pagkatapos niya.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, I think he is the most famous writer in America. And I know he is known in his self-reliance.
Hindi pa siya. Kaya alam mo siya din? Hindi. Hindi po namin siya kalala. Kasi kami nagbabasa ng book. We're sorry.
I know him. I know that he is an essayist and he is also the author of Self-Reliance.
He who is not every day conquering some fear has not learned the secret of life.
Waldo Emerson is one of the few great poets, essayist, lecturer, and philosopher in 19th century. He was the father of transcendentalism.
Ralph Waldo Emerson is one of the few great poet, essayist, lecturer, and philosopher. He was the father of transcendentalism.
The times are the masquerades of the eternities, trivials to the dull tokens of noble and majestic agents of the wise.
My soul doth But when he talks about the infinitude of the private man, he's talking about something that's real and that most people still need to hear.
He's a friend to anyone that wants to live in the Spirit and wants to be free and wants others to be free. That's what he teaches.
Emerson was a prophet. Emerson was a prophet. Here is the real secret of Emerson's work. He stands still, he listens to his heart, and he writes as he listens.
At that time, people were thinking, and still do, that there's only a few divine souls on this planet. And he said, absolutely not. We are all divine.
Idealism sees the world in God. It beholds the whole circle of persons and things, of actions and events, of country and religion, not as painfully accumulated, atom after atom, act after act, in an aged, creeping past, but as one vast picture, which God paints on the instant eternity for the contemplation of the soul.
The America into which Ralph Waldo Emerson was born was a nation on the verge of great changes. Just a short generation before, it had freed itself politically and economically from England, a freedom that would soon be tested in the War of 1812. Its example of democracy had inspired the French to overthrow their own monarchy. And yet this newest of nations was unsure of itself. Still looking to Europe for culture, still clinging to many of the institutions bequeathed by the British. It would be up to Emerson to carry the revolution to individual men and women by exhorting them to a freedom of the spirit as well.
Why should we not also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should we not have a poetry and philosophy of insight, and not of tradition, and a religion by revelation to us, and not the history of theirs?
William Emerson was the pastor of the First, or Old Brick, Church of Boston, and was a man of wide-ranging interest who made a comfortable living for his wife and their 6 children. But William Emerson died when Waldo was 8, and although his widow received a small pension from the church, the family fell into poverty, sometimes feasting on stories and conversation rather than food. Despite their reversal of fortune, Waldo's mother, Ruth Haskins Emerson, was determined that he receive a good education. While she took in boarders, he and his younger brother Edward would take turns going to the Boston Latin School, since they had only one overcoat between them. In letters and in person, she encouraged all the Emerson children to read widely, think deeply, to love nature, and to love God. She was in many ways the model for self-reliance. On October 25th, he wrote, "I find myself often idle, vagrant, stupid and hollow. This is somewhat appalling, and if I do not discipline myself with diligent care, I shall suffer severely from remorse and the sense of inferiority hereafter. All around me are the industrious and shall be great. I am indolent and shall be insignificant."
I say to the universe, Mighty One, thou art not my mother. Return to chaos if thou wilt. I shall exist. I live. If I owe my being, it is to a destiny greater than thine. Star by star, world by world, system by system shall be crushed, but I shall live. There is a pleasure in the thought that the particular tone of my mind at this moment may be new in the universe, that the emotions of this hour may be peculiar and unexampled in the whole eternity of moral being. I lead a new life. I occupy new ground in the world of spirits, untenanted before. I commence a career of thought and action which is expanding before me into a distant and dazzling infinity. Strange thoughts start up like angels in my way and beckon me onward. I doubt not I tread on the highway that leads to the divinity. She has the purity and confiding religion of an angel. Are the words common? The words are true. Will God forgive me my sins and aid me to deserve this gift of his mercy?
Purity is an outward gift which is seldom despised except by those to whom it had been refused.
The American Transcendentalism. In the 1830s, Emerson gave lectures that he afterward published in essay form. These essays, particular in nature in 1836, embodied his newly developed philosophy. The American scholars, based on a lecture that he gave in 1837, encouraged American authors to find their own style instead of imitating their foreign predecessors.
Never lose an opportunity of seeing anything beautiful, for beauty is God's handwriting. Art is a jealous mistress, and if a man has a genius for painting, poetry, music, architecture, or philosophy, he makes a bad husband and an ill provider.
By the 1870s, the aging Emerson was known as the Sage of Concord. Despite of his failing health, he continued to write Publishing Society in Solitude in 1870, and a poetry collection titled Parnassus in 1874.
So, here the famous quotation of the American writer Ralph Waldo Emerson. Power is in nature, the essential measure of the right. Nature suffers nothing to remain in her kingdoms which cannot help itself. We must be lovers, and at once the impossible become possible. Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. There is a soul at the center of a nature, and over the will of every man, so that none of us can wrong the universe. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. The laws of friendship are austere and eternal, of one web with the law of nature and morals.
This happiness was to be short-lived. Less than 18 months later, at 9 o'clock in the morning of February 8, 1831, Ellen died of tuberculosis. She was just 19. Emerson recorded that
one of the last things she said, after much rambling and inarticulate expression, was, "I have not forgot the peace and joy."
Emerson was heartbroken, but deeply believed that Ellen lived on in heaven and would serve as a guiding spirit and intercessor to God. Ellen's death shattered his dreams, but not his faith. It allowed him to step off the path of convention and open up once again to the direct intuitions of his soul. 10 years later, in his essay on compensation, he would write,
"And yet the compensations of calamity are made apparent to the understanding also, after long intervals of time. The death of a dear friend, wife, brother, lover, which seemed nothing but privation, somewhat later assumed the aspect of a guide or genius, for it commonly operates revolutions in our way of life. Religion is the relation of the soul to God, and therefore the progress of sectarianism marks the decline of religion. For looking at God instantly reduces our disposition to dissent from our brother. A man may die by fever as well as by consumption, and religion is as effectually destroyed by bigotry as by indifference.
In September of 1832, against all advice from his family, he resigned his ministry from the Second Church. In December, he closed up his house, sold all his furniture, and made a clean break with the past. The life that not long before seemed so secure had disintegrated. Not yet 30, his first love dead, his career in ruins, Emerson boarded a ship on Christmas Day and set sail for Europe. Like America, Europe too was in the throes of change. While relatively peaceful militarily, culturally it was swept up in the movement that would come to be called Romanticism. In large part, a reaction to the rationality and formalism of the 18th century, Romanticism stressed emotion and intuition as roots to knowledge, as well as a deep curiosity about nature from both scientific and spiritual perspectives. Beethoven in music, Goethe and Wordsworth in literature, and nature painters such as Constable and Turner were the leading artists. In addition, fed by an interest in democracy and the war for independence in Greece, there was a new interest in Plato's philosophy. Reversing the usual route, Emerson first landed in Malta and worked his way north through Italy. As the winter turned to spring, his own sickliness began to leave him, and his attention was drawn out to both the natural and cultural beauty of the ancient world. Coming from the severe Puritan world of Boston, Emerson's eye and mind were dazzled by the connections to the classical world, by St. Peter's in Rome and the artworks in Florence. What had been to him descriptions from books now became real places and tangible objects. He was immersed in beauty and philosophy. Moving on to Paris brought him at first unwillingly back into the present.
I was sorry to find that in leaving Italy, I had left forever that air of antiquity and history which her towns possess, and in coming hither I had come to a loud, modern New York of a place.
But while Italy had overwhelmed him with art, Paris would overwhelm him with a unitive view of science. It was the center of a new taxonomy of the plant world that emphasized living specimens and the growth cycle. Visiting exhibitions of plants and animals, Emerson was taken with the sheer number and variety of species, and also with their expression of what he called the upheaving principle of life. He also saw them as reflections of the mind of man.
Not a form so grotesque, so savage, or so beautiful, but is an expression of some property inherent in man the observer, an occult relation between the very scorpions and man. I am moved by strange sympathies. I say continually, I will be a naturalist.
From France, Emerson moved on to Great Britain. Given his English heritage, he had always held it in special regard, and he arranged to meet some of his literary idols, the poets Coleridge and Wordsworth. He was graciously received, but was disappointed that the visits more resembled audiences than conversations. However, his meeting with Scottish essayist Thomas Carlyle and his wife Jane he described as a white day in my years. His essay on German literature had put into English many precepts of what was being called transcendentalism. Not so much a doctrine as a state of being. Transcendentalism saw reason as an innate human faculty for knowing truth, and it confirmed Emerson's own spiritual experiences.
Emerson died in April 27, 1882 in Concord. His beliefs and his idealism were strong influences on the work of his protege, Henry David Thoreau, and his contemporary, Walt Whitman, as well as numerous others. His writings are considered major documents of the 19th century American literature, religion, and thought.
Waldo Emerson, I think he's the most famous writer in America, and I know he is known in his self-reliance. Kasi namin nagbabasa ng